YouTube. Okay, it looks like we are live. One second, I'm just checking to make sure YouTube is live. We are live in both places. We did it! We did it! This is like our biggest live stream to date.
We did it!
We even have Mojo. I love that we're both wearing red. I feel like we should have been a little more colorful, but luckily we have a lot of guests to bring that flair.
Oh yeah, I don't think yes. I think we're just setting the appetizer for what's to come. And this is just gonna get more colorful as
It
we
is.
go.
We have such an amazing night in store. Usually our live streams are half an hour, but this one is going to be a full hour. So we're hoping that people are rolling in, and if you join a little late, like just come on in as you see this and get to the part where it's live, and feel free to like ask questions, make comments. We love when the chat blows up during these live streams.
What are we doing here? We are celebrating Pride, but I think
Woo.
we also need to understand why we celebrate Pride and why
Mhm.
it's important for us to understand the history of Pride. And we are leaving it up to people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community to talk about their own experiences and really enlighten us with the things that we probably don't understand. Like as straight heteronormative
Mhm.
women that we are, I'm just speaking for Julie and I,
Mhm.
there's a whole other community that we are not part of, but we want to understand even more. And that's why we want to celebrate this community, and we want to celebrate all of our listeners who are part of the LGBTQ plus community.
And I think a big part of it is knowing the history of why do we celebrate? Why do we celebrate for a full month? And so we can really support our community members and be true allies. I think ultimately that's what being dateable is all about. It's, like loving the relationships that we have, and relationships can be with our fellow dateables in our community. So we're not going to keep babbling for a long time. We're going to turn this over to Ryan and Matt, who are going to lead the live stream, but we have a ton of special guests. We're able to get a lot of you from the community to share your individual stories. So UA and I are going to welcome them on, and then we're going to go backstage and we're going to help let the people in as we introduce each guest. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Matt and Ryan.
Yay! Here they
And here they
come.
are.
Oh.
Hello,
Woo!
cuties.
Okay, let's get closer because
There they are.
we got the little screen. Okay, so UA and I are going to exit. We
Mhm.
are going to become backstage producers, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Have
All right.
fun.
I was
Have
looking for the
fun.
group. I'm not seeing it really quick though.
I think I see it coming up. One second. Let's make sure we're not just talking to
Yeah,
ourselves
Do you see it?
before we do that.
I was trying to pull it up so I could see it.
That is so strange.
I don't think we're
UA,
live.
oh my God, are you? No, it's showing. Oh my God, we're not live. Oh my God, but we're live on
Hilarious.
YouTube.
That
Okay,
was a dress rehearsal.
this was just rehearsal. We'll have you guys leave again, and we're gonna do this
Okay.
again. And we're just gonna keep it up for YouTube.
Sorry.
That
Okay,
is
yeah.
too funny. Okay, we'll see you in a few. Wow,
All right.
this is too funny.
That
Okay,
is amazing.
we are now going live. Oh wait,
Here we go.
get out,
Wait,
get out.
sorry.
Get out.
Wow.
Louise is like, I don't see it.
Oh my God. We are actually live now.
Are we?
You
For
all,
sure?
I don't know. We need
Oh, okay, all right, we're good.
Okay, we're good. You all are not going to believe what just happened. We just had the best live snafu. So if you've been watching on YouTube this whole time, you've seen the whole thing go down. But welcome everyone on Facebook. You and I just did an intro for like 10 minutes talking to no one but ourselves. So good times. Catch it on
Dress
YouTube.
rehearsal?
Exactly. A dress rehearsal. But we are so excited to be here for our special live Pride Edition.
Yay! Happy Pride, everyone. This is a special live stream that we're so honored to be part of because we have some special guests from our community who are part of the LGBTQ plus community to talk about their experiences with Pride and really shed some light on why we are celebrating. I mean, I love any good reason to celebrate and go out and party and be part of all the events, but then we got to step back and be like, hey, what is it that we're actually celebrating? So get ready for not just enlightening conversation, but also enlightening experiences to be shared.
Exactly. And we are so honored that we have Ryan and Matt who are going to be leading the charge on the live stream. But we also have a ton of special guests from the community. So everyone can hear a bunch of folks' unique experiences and stories. And the goal of this is really to like understand why do we celebrate Pride and become the allies that we all can be and support each other, because that's what Dateable really means.
So, shall we bring on our dateable couple,
Let's do
Ryan and
it. All
Matt?
right, right. Yes, we have a dateable couple. So who better to lead the charge here than Ryan and Matt? Wait, do I not see them in here?
Oh no, where they go? This is the great thing about live is anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Oh wait, I see him. I see him. My
Okay,
bad. User
there
error.
they are.
User error. We are just killing it today with the live stream all. But we have the men of the hour. Yay.
Yay!
Hey, get a little closer to get in the screen, you know?
Yeah, there they go.
Awesome. So Yue and I are going to hang out. We are going to let you guys run the show. We'll be backstage and we'll come on at the very end to kind of, wrap the whole thing up. So without further ado, let's turn it over to you two.
Have fun, you two.
Thanks. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this special live broadcast of our Pride coverage here. Basically, we really wanted to, when Julie and Yue asked me if I'd be willing to do something like this, obviously my response was yes, but. Always a yes, but. And then I went and talked to Matt because she asked if Matt would like to join for it as well. And the first thing that Matt said to me was,
as long as you make it intersectional.
yeah. So that was kind of a big thing. We really wanted to make sure that we had a broad scope of people that we were able to join, speak their different intersectionalities, and really kind of bring some of that openness that we really have in the LGBTQ plus community to the table here. So really, it's about shared experiences, understanding one another, and how not just from outside of the community, but even within the community, we can do more in our allyship to each other, because ultimately civil rights fights are not just for one aspect of that LGBTQ plus community. Throughout the history of it, it's really been so much crossovers. It's really a constant fight for what we can all have equality together for eventually. So, and that comes through that understanding of each other's intersectionality. So, the first thing we really wanted to cover on it was a little bit of LGBTQ plus history. And unfortunately, it is a little bit skewed towards American history on that. So sorry to some of our international friends here, but the big thing that we really wanted to touch on here is how LGBTQ plus history is not usually just isolated to fighting for our rights. It's usually coupled with civil rights fights
In general.
in general.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of just start by touching on women's suffrage and women's activism in the U.S., which is really kind of a big part of LGBTQ plus history that's overlooked. A lot of the active members of the women's rights movements were actually members of the lesbian community or the genderqueer community, women who slept with women, and that is kind of a big portion of where their fight for independence or liberation from men, having autonomy for themselves came from. I mean, yes, it was a lot of housewives as well. It was a lot of married women wanting to be represented as well, but there were a lot of leading members of that movement that were part of the lesbian community. Um, so one of those big members, Jane Addams. A lot of people are really familiar with this person. She founded the Hull House, which actually housed a lot of immigrants from all over the world. So that actually brought her in with a lot of communities. And so she really kind of was a driving force for this women's rights movement. And she was someone who constantly fought not just for women's rights, but all women's rights. The women's rights movement actually had a tendency to sometimes skew towards just white women. After the passing of the 15th Amendment, they were left out of the right to vote during that. So they really re-geared towards that and kept it as an inclusive thing, so that when women's suffrage 19th Amendment passed in 1920, they were able to make sure that it was for all women, not just specific women. Moving into Stonewall, things a little more current, we've had a lot of problems with Hollywood representing it as a bit of a whitewash. There was even a large backlash towards I believe it was 2015 film, because most of the characters were represented as white men, standard men. However, a lot of the characters that were active in that actual historic event were a lot of black trans women and a lot of trans men and women just in general, gender queer women and men. So it was, you know, unfairly represented in that historical recanting of it. Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, members like that were just not shown for the characters that they were. And these are people who went on fighting for LGBTQ plus rights after that. So it's interesting that that's an odd thing that we're not seeing with history.
Right. And of course, the first Pride Parade was the year after Stonewall, and every year after that on June 29th to commemorate the anniversary of Stonewall, to spearhead gay liberation. And I think it's interesting how pretty much throughout history, Pride events have taken on a different fight in each portion of history. So in 1970, you had the celebration of Stonewall, gay liberation, basically being able to be seen in public, be gay, repealing of sodomy laws that in some states were still around. And then throughout the 80s and early 90s, you had a turn towards addressing the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
And then, in the 1990s to 2000s, it was all about marriage equality. And now that we have that passed, we're starting to be better about being intersectional, about really focusing on the members of our community who are the most structurally marginalized groups. So Pride year takes on a different meaning, but still links back to the history that we have throughout, gay history, pretty much.
Right, and so that was kind of the big thing, even with like women's rights movement, with members like Jane Addams and other members of that community. They set aside lesbian rights and coupled it in with just women's rights in general, and women's autonomy in general. And then, we have current day things such as like the Black Lives Matter movement. I think Pride last year really took a shift to try and help support a lot of the black members of the community, because it was such a pivotal time for us to set forward and do that. And that's why it's so key in history, because it's not just one person's fight. It's such a wide arcing rainbow that we're all included under, and it's such a key thing for us to really keep focusing on that intersectionality, learning about each other and understanding each other, so that we can all work together towards that common goal.
Yeah.
So that brings us probably into our first guest here, which is going to be Brian. Everybody knows him and loves him as the most dateable, so I think now would be a great time to go ahead and bring him on in. Give it just a moment. Going.
Hello, everyone. Ryan and Matt.
Hey.
Hi. So something that we didn't do when we first started was, and we're going to do this all the way throughout, is we're going to really kind of allow everyone to represent themselves the way that freely represent themselves here. It is a safe and comfortable space. So as everyone knows, I'm Ryan. Hi. I identify as he, him, and I am a cisgendered gay male.
Matt, My pronouns are he, him, and I am also a cisgendered gay male.
Okay, and we've now welcomed in Brian. I'm going to hand the floor over to you to speak.
Thank you, Ryan and Matt, and also thank you for organizing this. This is an amazing thing that we're doing, and it's great recognition, I think, for the queer people in the Dateable community who are listening and want to hear more voices as well. My name is Brian. For those of you who don't know, I am a cis gay man, and I use he/him pronouns as well. Yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about kind of what pride means to me and kind of where I'm at with my journey. I talked a little bit about this in my episode on healing your dating wounds, but for me, pride really means a time to celebrate. So, as queer people, we don't always have the permission, unfortunately, to celebrate us. Time of the year that we are kind of given that. It's a time to acknowledge the progress we've made, and specifically all the fighting that past generations have done so that we can have the rights and freedoms we have today. It's also a time to reflect on what our generation needs to do in order to keep pushing the agenda so that future generations can continue to have even more freedoms and rights as the movement moves on. For me, understanding what pride is and what it means to me has been a slow journey. I was raised in the Catholic Church in a very conservative part of the US, as many have been. And in that kind of background, you don't hear the most positive messages. Gay was synonymous with cancer. It was synonymous with sin, immoral. A lot of things, messages were given to me at a young age that really impacted not just how I viewed queer people, but how I really viewed myself. And this was also further impacted. I'm a parent of an immigrant, so there's a lot of expectation around specifically being a man and what that means with carrying on family traditions, carrying on family names. And so there was a lot of, I guess you could say, walls into my coming out process. And while it's easy to sort of focus on those things as derogatory, in a lot of ways it did help me come to understand who it is I eventually want to become. So you'll hear this kind of talked about a lot in queer spaces, but there's often this journey of how do we become our authentic self? Because we spend so much time in our youth being someone else, because that's what we kind of have to do to pass. But it's not usually until we're adults, and usually as well until we have a little bit of therapy, that we really understand what it means to live as an authentic self. And really, I just wanted to lay that out as a little bit of my journey, and specifically kind of talk a bit about where I'm at now, which is with what it means to be an ally. And I think oftentimes with allyship, it's a bit of a buzzword. It's thrown around in politics. It's thrown around on social media. But those who aren't really in the advocacy space probably don't know too much about allyship. When I first started really meeting other people in the community, not just gay people, but also bisexual people, pansexual people, and even more recently, trans and non-binary people, it was a process. It is a process. And for me, allyship really means being willing to learn, being willing to listen, and being willing to take a step back and show up for others. So even as queer people, we don't always know everything. We have to do our own education ourselves, and I think that's something that I would really like to hit home on is a lot of people listening to this are going to be straight, and you may be wondering, well, how can I show up for my queer friends, my gay friends, my lesbian friends, my trans friends? Showing up for me really means being authentic and trying to make that connection. So it's really easy, for instance, to make a post or to like a status, but I would actually challenge people to go a little further than that. Strike up a conversation with someone who maybe is someone you wouldn't normally talk to. try to see things from someone else's point of view. Maybe go to a listening forum at your university and learn about a topic that you're not familiar with that has to do with queer history or the queer experience. There are a lot of ways you can put yourself out there and show up for others in queer spaces and non-queer spaces. And I think that really is the first step to true, authentic allyship. And that's something I wanted to communicate.
Yeah, that's super beautiful, and honestly, like, really interesting that you noted on kind of like the self-loathing that's instilled within, being raised Catholic, because I definitely felt that myself, and even, like you said, struggling with self-identity. My parents even saying like, "Oh, do you have a crush on this girl?" Whatever, and like, of course, then you're not even really sure of what's happening. So yeah, sure, yeah, I've got a crush on that girl or whatever, and you struggle with that so long, that like it is kind of, that's the new thing, is like trying to really belonging, right? So I think it's great that you're making that challenge, because it's honestly really one of the biggest things that a lot of people can do is helping, making people feel welcome in that space, allowing their friends and their family, whoever they are, to really kind of feel safe and okay to be that person through that self identity, and encouraging to understand that person more. It's really awesome. Um, so, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that bit with us, Brian, and I think that that's great advice as well.
So I actually have a question for you, Brian, to just kind of keep moving. So you talked about being your authentic self. I think that's a really important part of being a member of this community, is really trying to find who you are. There's so many different facets. Um, you mentioned therapy, somewhat of a joke, but what steps have you taken to really come to terms with your own identity or your own identity? If there's any listeners that are in the closet or struggling to figure themselves out, what would you recommend for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and also a very big question to answer.
In a short
This,
comparison, yeah.
yes, yes. It's interesting because my answer would change if I was a much younger person versus someone where I'm kind of at in my life stage now. For me, it's been a long process. So when I first came out, I was met with both kind of acceptance, but then a lot of not acceptance. And my journey with acceptance really came back to my journey with myself. So I think when we throw on acceptance, people generally think, oh, I need to come out to other people, I need other people to accept me. And that's really more of the surface value of it. And while coming out to other people is an important step, learning to come out to yourself, learning to be comfortable in your own skin, learning to challenge the derogatory, negative things society and people have told you about yourself, and really understand this internal battle that you've been fighting for so long. That's where the real work happens. And so I just kind of want to point that out, that work has really taken the longest to me. So anyone listening right now, maybe kind of wondering, maybe you have a friend who hasn't come out, or maybe a family member, it really is a long process. And as queer people, we have to come out to people pretty much the rest of our lives. So I wouldn't, and while it's important, I wouldn't put too much power into sort of the first time telling someone, as it really is a life journey with yourself. So I'm not quite sure if that answers your question. I feel like I went a little bit around.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really amazing thing to suggest to people. And again, I think it really is just opening the floor for that communication to happen, and allowing people to feel comfortable for that. So that is a really great thing to present. I will go ahead and allow for us to open up for our next guest. Brian, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences with us. It was really a privilege to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So our next guest is actually somebody who has been on the podcast before. Also, a quick plug for Brian. If you haven't checked out his episode, he did have an episode this season. Go check that out. It's really great. He talks on mental health, and it's amazing. Our next guest is actually somebody who talks about something that Matt has kind of talked about at length in speech and debate, because Matt does a lot of, or did a lot of that in college.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
He's going to touch on kind of the intersectionality between race and the LGBT community. They haven't always had the best relationship. A perfect example is who organized the March on Washington for MLK, but was largely cast out of the gay rights movement due to his sexuality. And then on the same side, you see a lot of racism by white gay men expressed to other races in our community, unfortunately. And so our next speaker has a lot of experience and actually did a whole episode on it, I believe.
Mhm.
So
Yep, so let's go ahead and bring Chris in.
Hey, how's it going?
Looking good, liking the Pride tank,
Thanks.
colorful.
Target Pride collection.
Yeah.
Me too.
So-
Yes, I got those rainbow ice cream cones on. You know, we're sporting it. Rainbow colors here.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I would love to go ahead and hand it over for you to let everyone know how you self-identify.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and thanks so much for organizing this and leading this discussion. This is a super important discussion to have. Yeah, well, my name's Chris. I'm a cis, a gay male, preferred pronouns he, him. Um, and as with with Brian and Ryan and Matt, I also love celebrating Pride. I think it's super important, especially having come from a religious background as well, to be able to live life authentically and out loud and let people see that you can be a gay man and also be other things. you know. It's really really great to celebrate Pride every year. But my celebration of Pride has always been complicated by the fact that there, as within society as a whole, there's deep-seated racism and systemic biases in the gay community, and it sort of reflects in interesting ways. So, as I discussed in my podcast episode, um, gay men often are very frank about their sexual preferences. You go on Grinder or Scruff or any of the many apps, and you're just barraged with all these. Oh, I like this and know that, and so there's a lot of femphobia. There are a lot of preferences that are thrown around, but one of them that was usually seen as okay is preferences based off of race, and people tend not to call that racism. They call that preferences. Um, and I've seen profiles that even went so far as to say "squinty eye, no reply," talking about Asian men. Really terrible stuff. No blacks, no femmes, no Asians was also a refrain that you would hear a lot on Grinder. And in having conversations with people about these, oftentimes it's not completely clear to people why those preferences might not be great. So the place where systemic racism comes from in the U.S. It's based off of stereotypes. It's based off of not knowing the people that you have ill will towards, and all of those really conspire in sex and dating as well. For the same reason that a police officer might be threatened by a black man that's holding a cell phone and thinks it's a gun, or the same reason why a bank might say that a black family isn't as ready for a mortgage as say a white family of the similar qualifications are. That can also extend to dating, in which a person of a certain race might not be worthy of love or as suitable as a partner. And all of those really, really come from the same place. So, as a part of Pride, I like to personally reevaluate my own sexual preferences, and I encourage others to do the same and really interrogate what those actually mean and where they actually might come from. And one really easy thing to do, and I like to tell people, is to diversify even just your friend groups. because it's really hard not to see the humanity in others when you get to know them on an intimate level, and the easiest way to do that is to make more friends.
Right.
So yeah, I think an important part of allyship during Pride is to evaluate these prejudices in the gay community and really interrogate them and try to change them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And honestly, I really think that the incredible part about that is that you're not saying just like that somebody needs to be willing to like sit at the table, because it's always fine for us to sit at the table. It's somebody has to be willing to come to the table in the first place. So be willing to come to the table and then sit with that person and really get to understand them and feel them out, so that you can bring that humanity to that person as well, and start seeing more of the similarities instead of the otherness is really the big thing, because at the end of the day we are all people. And
Yeah,
it really doesn't matter. It's more about the value of that person's integrity than it is the shape or color of their skin or anything really.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and while this is a specific problem in the gay community, I don't know why gay white men have like some higher privilege in our community to be so vocal about those things in the way that sometimes straight people aren't, at least on dating apps. But one of the solutions I offered when I did a speech about this was looking at your Tinder matches. Are they proportionally representative of the population that you're swiping against? And if they're not, I think you brought this point up. Like, you really kind of have to ask yourself why, and where the root of potentially even your subconscious comes from when picking potential partners.
Yeah, so I've done that, and I'm definitely I'm not high and mighty here. I scroll through white, and like and that there's something going on there, and all of these forces that are operating on us that we'll see movies with two white romantic leads, and we see that over and over and over and over and over again, and we'll see TV shows in which a strong white guy is shown as the ultimate love interest, the ultimate catch, and all of that has to go somewhere, and it manifests itself in our own different preferences. So it's even people of color, I think, including me.
Yeah.
We have to look at these preferences.
Yeah, that's really a great point. And honestly, thank you so much for bringing that to the table for us, and thank you for offering your experiences as well. I mean, it's really honestly just great to have you on and share with us. Thank you for your
Great, thanks.
vulnerability.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, thanks for joining us, Chris. We'll go ahead and start heading over to our next guest here. So this guest actually came to us as a referral from Brian. He is a friend of Brian's. Them are a friend of Brian's. I apologize. So the guest that I'd like to bring in is George. George, sorry. Hi, George.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you. How are you doing this evening?
Well, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Good,
Happy
good.
Pride and happy Hump Day. And
Yes, we are nearing the weekend and it's so close. Yeah, thank you for coming on with us. It's really important to have you here. I am so thrilled that we get to have you talk. You sent me this amazing message. I kind of asked you for a bit of your self-identity, and I got this whole like interesting wall, and I was like, this is a very dynamic person. This person has so much going on in their life. So please go ahead and take the floor, and feel free to let us know how you self-identify and tell us about yourself.
well, my name is Georgia, and I use the pronouns they, them, they, there, and as an alternative, I prefer no pronouns, and worst come to worst, I have gone by he, him, his. And I'm a genderqueer person and also an immigrant. I guess my official visa status is legal alien, which is kind of like a funny way of labeling us. And I am a taxpayer, just in case that the IRS is tuning in and listening to this. Important PSA. Yeah, I mean, for me, just being, I guess, like understanding myself is always kind of outside of or having my identity be always understood nearly as an opposition to some of the mainstream. I've always kind of faced some pushback and suspicion and doubt, even 5 years when I started to understand myself as not a result of the research that I was doing and explored. I started this whole journey of self discovery that really has spanned several years and still goes on, right? Because this is kind of like an ongoing thing for many queer people. And I feel like the first time that I've experienced a little bit of that doubt and suspicion was through dating and not really understanding what it is that identifying yourself outside of the binary entails, and receiving comments such as you don't really know yourself, or you're going to understand yourself in a couple of years, or you just want attention, or you're confused and don't really know who you are, which have all been kind of like invalidating comments that have oftentimes happened from people within the community or I was dating, and sometimes even at work. However, during that journey, I've oftentimes had to come back to myself and really get reunited with that first motivation to even say out loud that I don't identify as a man, and start interrogating what does that mean for me. And of course, just with like all many queer people, I feel like I have a membership for therapy, and although I deliver it too, it's just very much of a necessity in coping with all of these kind of pushbacks and these power structures that you need to understand yourself, and you need to kind of like find a stable ground to stand on in reaction to, in response to all of these kind of like to all this questioning from the mainstream. So that was kind of my journey of getting to really be myself without the pressure of proving my identity to others, and also starting to define for myself what does that look like, and then also making the negotiations, as I often tend to say, that our identity is sometimes a negotiation that we have with the world. And it can come as a result of what is the status of safety that we have, what is the support system that we have around us. So for many queer people, the coming out process will really be a privilege and something that is not something everyone can access. So with that, even with pride and celebrating all of our diverse colors, I feel like the message can be too that we have patience with people who are still building those support systems and building those resources around them to create a kind of a nest where they feel comfortable in, blossoming into the wonderful peacock or whatever other type of bird they are. And yeah, it's for me also kind of like understanding that oftentimes I've had to pass during my time, even as an immigrant. I feel like I oftentimes come across as American, and even that was done understanding the biases that people oftentimes have and how to get ahead. Like oftentimes from queer community and people beyond the queer community, I've experienced kind of questioning on why I'm in the US and whether I'm coming here to steal resources or come for jobs that are not made for me. And moving to the US at the time of Trump, right after Obama, not to make this political or anything, I feel like just by my appearance, my political ideology is obvious, but I did experience difficulty in trying to also pass in ways that will make me seem more legitimate and professional. And I feel that that kind of those threads of competence and professionalism and passing and ability have often come up in those two identities, because people will question you if you do not either fit in visually or in your behavior with the rest of the crowd. So I would like to remind also people that during time of Pride, we can also question how can we create spaces together with allies where we don't need passing and we don't need strategic passing and people kind of like activating their identity at times when they feel comfortable and safe and then passing with whatever is normative at the time. So inviting allies to help us create those spaces and so that we have less pushback on how we identify and how we present in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said about like having the sense of security as well, to have that space and to have that ability to be comfortable in their identity. It's really about like really trying to maintain that atmosphere where we don't have to feel like coming out is even really a thing anymore. I think that that's kind of the end game, right? Is that like if we are all so understanding and accepting of everyone, it's just like, well, this is how this person chooses to identify, and this is how their identity is true to them. Like, then that is for them, and that has nothing to do with me, and that's a beautiful thing. Like, and just accepting people as they come to us.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. We talked about the privilege of being able to come out, but then in response to you, there's also a privilege with this future state worldview of not being able or not coming out at all, right? And you know, even like with my family, my expectations I would show up with a guy and no one would bat an eye. But there's an intense amount of privilege in knowing that I would be safe, and if my parents cut me off, I'm financially stable and don't have to worry about what they would think. So it's interesting, like even when you think of like the stereotypical gay agenda, what we want to get to, right now in the status quo, so many of those things necessitate a level of privilege that
Exactly.
most people don't have access to.
And that's what I always tell everyone too, is that I had the privilege when I was coming out that I was able to tell my parents like, hey, this is what I know about me, and this is what I'm telling you now, so that you know that as well. And I was able to be accepted by my family. I didn't have to worry about, you know, losing my sense of home, losing my stability when that happened. And like, that's just not the privilege that so many people have. So letting people know also in your immediate surroundings, you know, friends, family, whoever they are, that like they have that security with you can be such a hugely impactful thing on. And I think that that's such a great thing that you really touched on.
Yeah. And for many people, it's going to take some time to get there, right?
Right. Well, that was a really amazing thing to bring to the table for us. And again, we appreciate the beautiful part of the rainbow that you've brought to us today. So thank you for giving us your time. It was really amazing having you with us.
Thank you for having me, and happy Pride.
Happy
Happy
Pride.
Pride. Okay, so our next guest that's going to be with us here is going to be Victoria. And Victoria came to me a little bit last moment, but we were able to discuss, and we're going to bring her in to talk about some of her experiences. So if we can, go ahead and bring Victoria in. Yeah. And Victoria came to me a little bit last moment. Hi, Victoria. Able to discuss and getting just a little bit of echo. Talk about some
Sorry,
of her
give me a second to fix
experiences.
that.
So if we that's okay. Bring Victoria in. And
Okay, cool. I think I
Great.
fixed it.
okay.
It's better
Well,
now,
thank
right?
you
There's
for
no.
coming on with us on such short notice.
Yeah, hi Victoria. I am identify as she, her. I am a heteromantic, asexual person, woman, lady. um, and if you want to get in more into detail, within the ace community, there's different ways to describe your like attitude to sex or like and whatever. So there ranges from sex favorable, sex neutral to sex repulsed. I'm sex neutral, which means that I can take it or leave it. I will do it for like my partners, but it's not like something I want really or crave, but it's not something I like hate either. So there's a bunch of like different ways to describe that, and I guess I go with sex neutral. Um, yeah. And then, I guess so about like intersectionality and like my identities. I'm Asian. I'm Chinese. I'm also ace. And I guess like it's a really interesting intersectionality because being Asian, there's like two parts to it. One of them is like growing up, aceness felt like the norm because you're like, oh yeah, you're supposed to like not be interested in dating, and then when you're just dating, you're supposed to just date, and sex is not on the table. And I'm like, great, I don't understand why this is a concern. Like this makes
Right, this
sense.
is normal for me.
Yeah, and then so this is I'm heteromantic, which means that I like guys. So like I like kissing guys and like hugging guys, and I have crushes. Not really. I don't know. I guess ace crushes are a little bit different from like normal people crushes, but like not normal people, but like allosexual people crushes. But like so anyway, there's that. And then on the other side, you know, there's like as an Asian woman, you're like, oh yeah, like yellow fever. Like everyone's like, oh, I want to try it, Asian. Which is gross. Please never try that or think about that. That's really nasty. And we are not your like, you know, your like toy or whatever. Um, yeah, there's those two things about being Asian. And then on the ace side, there's a lot of stuff there. So there's like, it's really interesting. So the bonus biggest thing is that there's like underrepresentation because there's a lack of exposure because it's like because most ace people also tend to have a romantic orientation, you're like, oh yeah, I'm like just like everyone else, like I'm either like, you know, straight because I like guys, or like straight, or like, you know, gay or bi or whatever. But the thing is, there's actually like a difference dichotomy between romantic orientation and sexual orientation. And so um just because you like one gender doesn't mean that your sexual orientation is the same. And you can illustrate this an even more extreme example. There are people who are like, um, you know, homoromantic heterosexual, or homo rom- or heteromantic homosexual. In which case, that's like really split, and they like, I guess they probably identify as like bi, but that's even more complicated. Um, but yeah, there's that. So then there's that. So there's a lot of people who don't know. So a good example of this is that a lot of my closest friends and the people I've dated are somewhere in the ace spectrum. There's gray sexuality, which means you like are sexually attracted once at a blue moon, maybe like once every 5 years, once every 10 years. You know, it really depends how you want to identify with the label. There's demisexual, which seems to be somewhat common, which is basically that you only get sexually attracted to someone after you've known them, or like not known them, but like really emotionally connected with them. Imagine basically like no one turned you on until you've been your boyfriend for like, you know, 6 months or something like that is basically demisexual. Or like, or you've like had this friend that you've known for like 2 years, and like you're sexually attracted to that friend, but you're not sexually attracted to like your friend that you've known for like 1 month. That's like just example. So it's just that there's a lot of different ways to do it. My a lot of times some really close friends is demisexual. My boyfriend is demisexual, and he didn't know this until I told him that I was ace, and I told him to look up what it was. And then we were talking about it, and he was like, "By the way, I think I'm demi," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is really helpful."
This makes a lot more sense. Okay, we can play with this now. We know where to go with this now.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like suspected because I'm like, you don't seem to be approaching this like the average dude. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah. But I think that there's also a lot of people like while dating that they have a lot of questions about it. So I usually like to have the person get to know me first before they, you know, start making assumptions about like what I do or what I don't do, or like whether it means I'm a prude or like whatever, you know. There's been different ways this is manifested. One of them has been like back in college, I was like, not flirting does not come naturally to me because I'm like, I'm not a flirty person. I'm just like, I'm your friend, or like, I'm just gonna hang out with you. Like, I'm like, I like you because you're like a cool friend, and I want to like, you know, whatever. But then like, or
Right.
like, but then they'll be like, oh yeah, you're just like a friend to me, and I'm like, oh. And I've also figured out apparently my mistake was that I didn't know how to flirt because that doesn't come naturally to me. Uh, but I mean that's not something that all these people have. Like this is just exclusive to, I guess like this is just a problem I have personally, or something I've seen personally. And then so there's that. And then yes, oh yeah, there's also erasure within the LGBT sorry, erasure in general, but I've noticed that especially prevalent via the LGBT community, which is kind of sad. So erasure is basically saying like, oh, you're a snowflake. Stop giving like titles for things that no one cares about. No one cares about who you don't fuck. Like you're not experiencing any oppression. But no, this is legitimately there's like struggles that ace people have, like being medically diagnosed as like, why don't you have a sex drive? Like libido is different from attraction because people can, I don't know, there's a lot of memes about this. They're like, like the dog that's like, it's like what was it, like horny, no who, just horny. That's basically like how some people experience it. So like there's a lot of different things, and then like I don't know, this erasure about like, a lot of people are like, oh, this is about the pride movement is for people like who can love who they love. No one's gonna judge you for not loving like anybody, like but there's a lot of other things, like there are issues, like I think like in some places they won't rent to like friends, they'll only rent to couples, and I think that's like part of it. And there's like the medical thing, there's a bunch of like different things that I luckily haven't had this struggle of dealing with, but I know that other people in the community have. um so there's that. So I guess that's like a brief overview of like the main things. To be a good ally, I think the biggest thing is enthusiastic consent is extra important because because not every not like you can't generalize and say like an ace will or won't fuck you, but like a lot of them but like I think that like they have to want to be willing to do it, whatever reason it is. And like I think a lot of what happens is they try to like peer pressure you and say like, hey, we've been dating for 3 months, why won't you fuck me? And I'm like, I don't want to.
Right.
Like nothing against you, but I don't want to. And then like stuff like that. So I think that's important. Consent is extra important, and like so there's that, and then also communication of preferences and expectations. So like if you know upfront that you're like not really a sexual person, you can say like sex is not a big thing for me, and like I don't like people who pressure me into it. Stuff like that is really important, and like talking about that is really important and really helpful. Um, and then another note I have is there's also another thing that I am not, a lot of people, other people have, is called aromantic, which is basically they don't like anybody. They're just friends with people. And that could come in different forms. There are aromantic sexual people, and there's aromantic asexual people, and they have their own struggles, and I can't speak about them because I'm not one of them. But that is another thing to consider. And so, yeah, I think that's most of what I
Yeah.
want to say.
No, that's amazing. And that's actually part of the reason why we wanted to really offer the floor to everyone and not really make this a banter back and forth for the most part, but really to allow you to speak your truth on things, is because we wanted to have that representation. We did not want to try and speak for anyone else and put words in other people's mouths. So I think that that's amazing that you even touched on that about aromantics. You said I don't identify as aromantic, so I can't speak to it. And that's why it's been so key having people like you on here, Victoria, because I think you really touched on a lot of brilliant things that none of our other guests were able to do so. And I can't do that. So thank you so much for sharing those really intimate parts of how you love and how you date, and it's really amazing for you to bring that to us.
Yeah, there's like a thing I saw before that was like, you can have love without sex, you can have sex without love, you could have, there's different ways to do it. There's like, all the different ways to love. So it's like, and then I guess even aromantic people who have, I guess, love in their own ways, like friend love. So there's all these, there's one other thing worth mentioning. There's something called a queer platonic relationship, which is basically, the way I think about it is kind of like a, back when you were in like school and you had your best friend forever for life, like specifically like that one person you have like forever for life. That's basically, I think, the essence of like a queer platonic partner. It's like someone, it's common for ace people, it's also common for aromantic people, but basically it's like one person you pick to like share your life with, and it's usually like a, basically consider like a best friend. You'd live with them, and you like, they might give you, you might be each other's like emergency contact, You might like, you know, even choose to raise children together. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but that's another thing. So that's also another valid form of relationship that I think is not commonly discussed.
Yeah, thank you for bringing so much terminology. I'm just going to read some of the chat comments here because we have them. But I mean, UA said so many new terms I wasn't aware of. Julie chimed in as well and said, yes, I've learned so much from you, Victoria. You know, we're really just really happy to have so many of these. It looks like Julie also said you can have sex without love and love without sex. It's really amazing quote. It really is, you know, just a fantastic thing. So again, thank you for bringing so much to the table for us. And I know you had such a limited amount of time, so thank you for really. Oh, I love it.
My little ace flag.
Oh, I love it. It's so great. Well, thank you. This is why I was so happy to have you on when you messaged us, and I'm really glad we were able to get you in. So thank you for making time for us, Victoria.
Thank you for having me, and feel free to message me if you have any questions.
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, we did start just a little bit late, so we are run it through just to give time for our last guest and for Matt and I to give a little bit for us as well. But our next guest is one of the community members as well. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that guest on now. It is Amy. Everyone knows Amy, hopefully. Give it just a second. Hi, Amy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy. I'm a white cisgender woman. I go by she and her, and I am also bisexual. So I'm here to bring that part of the rainbow. So there's a few kind of particular challenges with being bi. There's a lot of challenges that I think we've already seen a lot of people share who are under the pride flag. And there's some kind of unique things to being bi, and some that are, I don't know, shared with a lot of other things. But hopefully, if people are still tuned in, if you might learn a little bit of something, help you be a better ally, but also maybe you might learn something that can help you be a better partner to either a current or future bi partner that you might have. So one of the things I want to bring up is erasure, which Victoria already gave a beautiful intro to and covered fairly well. But basically, representation matters. And the world, I think, is becoming, or at least, I don't know, Western culture, I should say, is becoming more embracing of the fact that there's not just straight people. Like, straight, I think, is still the default in a lot of media that we consume, but it's opening up. But one of the things that I see a lot is that it's okay, now there's straight or there's gay. You can be one of those two. Those are great. You can do those two things. And that's really, really limiting, which is also something that I think we heard in what Victoria was saying. There are a lot of options. There's a lot of ways to be. There's a lot of ways to love. There's a lot of ways to just live in the world and experience relationships with other people. And it's kind of interesting how many options aren't really represented. And bisexuality is definitely one of them. Something I've seen that I see frequently in movies and TV shows is there'll be a heterosexual couple that goes somewhere, and for whatever reason the guy goes off to like go get them drinks or something, and then he looks over and sees his girlfriend is chatting with some guy, and he gets all jealous and upset, which we at Dateable know that that's probably not the sign of a healthy relationship, but we'll move past that. He goes over, and the guy who was chatting up his girlfriend goes, "Oh, no, there's a misunderstanding here. Let me introduce my boyfriend." And then that's it. That's all that's said. Everyone goes, "Oh, ha, 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 what a funny thing." Obviously a misunderstanding. He has a boyfriend. He's obviously gay. He's not hitting on the girlfriend.
He might be. He could be. Yeah.
So just
Maybe
kind of something to think about. Yeah. Yeah. So, don't make assumptions. You never know what's going on. But
also,
yeah,
totally
it's just sort of the assumption that like
jealousy either.
right. But it's, if there's a man with a boyfriend, he might be gay, he might be bisexual. If there's a man with a girlfriend, he might be straight, he might be bisexual. Like, if I'm dating a man, I'm still bisexual. If I'm dating a woman, I'm still bisexual. If I'm dating someone who's not binary or genderqueer or anything else, I'm still bisexual. And that's still a really important part of my identity. And it's something that I didn't realize was part of my identity for a really long time, just because it's not really presented as an option. I was in my 30s by the time I really kind of came to terms with the fact that I'm bisexual, and that was such a freeing thing and just kind of opened up a big part of my life. I was in a relationship at the time, and still wasn't gonna like go outside of that relationship. We were not monogamous, and I was happy with that. But just knowing that about myself was really freeing. And it took me a really long time, just because, the default is heterosexual. From the time I was a kid, I knew I was attracted to guys, so I just figured that's what I was. And now it's really nice to know that, I don't know, there's more out there, I guess. There's another aspect of myself that I get to explore. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of options for ways to be. I kind of want to highlight that. Victoria was saying that a lot as well, that we really kind of down, and there's pros and cons to the labels that we give ourselves. And some of the pros are that, the queer community can be a really incredible place, where people talk about a lot of things that a lot of straight people don't really talk about, investigate and are curious and are open to things. And so those labels can help you find community, other people who are experiencing things the same way that you are, or in a similar way to what you are. But they can also be a little limiting. And I think that there's also a resistance to, it was kind of weird to come out in my 30s. Like, everyone I know, a lot of the people in my life have been there for a long time. And it's kind of weird for them to say, okay, well, this was how I always thought of you, but there's something different there now. But I think that as we learn more about ourselves, and there might be a lot of people, hopefully a lot of people, going and investigating some of these words and terms and things that we've been throwing out there today, and maybe learning some more. Yeah, learning some more about yourself. Like, maybe you never thought about whether your romantic attraction is the same as your sexual attraction. Like, that's an interesting thing to explore. And people might be learning more about themselves, or more about their partners or other people or whatever. But just don't be afraid to embrace that or try it, or you can be straight one day and then have a realization about yourself, and then be bisexual the next day, or whatever else. Life is a process of growing and learning, and this is an area that isn't an exception to that. There is one other thing that I want to, I don't know, to kind of sum up that point. Just remember that bisexuals exist. It's important because we might be hitting on your girlfriends. But for this next thing, we're probably not hitting on your girlfriends. A lot of kind of the pushback that I get most about being bi, if I'm dating someone and I mention that I'm bi, or bring up to them, make sure that they know, there's a couple of main reactions that I get. And one of them is wild insecurity about, oh my gosh, you're bisexual. I don't think I can satisfy you because I'm only, what I want, everything. You want more than that. That's a pretty big assumption to make. And I'm not going to speak for all bisexuals. There's a spectrum, and people experience it in different ways. But generally speaking, most bisexual people or pansexuals are not walking around horny for absolutely everybody that they meet. Just like if you're straight or you're gay or you're anything else, you're probably not also attracted to every single person who happens to be the gender that you can be attracted to. It's a matter of, you can be attracted to everybody, not you are attracted to everybody. I
Right.
think pretty much everybody has types that they go for. And that's true for bisexuals as well, for the most part. And the other thing that I get a lot is, particularly with guys, I think just because of the socialization that we get and things from media, oh, great, let's have a three-way.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
bisexual,
No, I don't want to
not,
have a threesome with you and someone else.
yeah. um, Not everyone who's bisexual feels the same way. I am bisexual and also extremely monogamous. Like, not gonna have a three-way with you. This is not like an open invitation to, like, I don't know, fulfill that particular fantasy. And I know that that's something that a lot of bisexual women in particular get a lot on social, not social media, but like dating apps and things, is if you say you're bisexual on there, then you're going to get a ton of people coming in and going, oh my gosh, fulfill my three-way fantasy. And there might be some who are open to that. Like, cool, good on them. I'm not one of them. Please don't assume that everyone who's bisexual is one of them. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's fun.
Yeah.
But
Amy,
just,
you touched on
it's
a lot of points that Victoria did not as well. So, and that's again one of the reasons why we wanted to have kind of these open intersectionality points here because, while Victoria did touch on a lot of really amazing things, you brought some amazing stuff to the table as well. Janice in the chat, you can be attracted, not you are attracted to everyone, or not
yeah.
everyone, but both male and female. And those are just like some key things. Again, having these different vantage points from our intersectionality is so important, and really keeping to have these conversations with everyone is why it's so important to keep this conversation going. So, thank you for your time and bringing everything that you brought with us today. Happy Pride.
Yeah, happy Pride.
All right. Well, in the aspect of keeping everything going here, we're going to move into just the last part here. I'm actually going to open it up to Matt. I've done a lot of talking. I don't want to talk everyone's face off, but Matt and I actually come from a subset community of HIV positive. So, Matt.
Yeah, we do. Oddly enough, it's one of the things that drew me to Ryan's Grinder profile, into this adorable face. But it's something that we have a lot of discussions about, and we've each had kind of unique experience with finding out we were HIV positive and how we confront it in our own lives. And especially for the gay and trans community, it's something that's kind of been ingrained in us since we came out. For example, my parents didn't care that I was gay. The first concern they had is, oh my God, you're going to get AIDS and die, which Ryan and I are living examples. You can take your one pill a day, be perfectly healthy. Yeah. But that's kind of the crafted reality that the straight world has created for us. And I think oftentimes it creates a lot of fear and anxiety of something that now is much more manageable. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of systemic struggles being HIV positive. For example, if you say that at work, you could be put on an ADA list, since HIV is an ADA compliance subset. In addition, there are a lot of states that have extremely restrictive laws, and the state we live in, Ohio, is one of them. So obviously I would never do this, and now, because I have him, but Ohio's laws pretty much state that if I were to go on a first date and I wanted to start making out with a guy even, I'd pretty much have to disclose my status, and if I don't, it's a class 2 felony that can get me up to 20 years. It's not based on transmission. It's not based on intent to transmit. It's just the fact that I have a disease, which, again, because I'm undetectable, I can't pass on to anyone else. And really, the frankly homophobic create the laws that place those restrictions on us. And that's something that the gay community, or the gay agenda, if you will, is starting to address. They realize that the HIV/AIDS epidemic did not end in the 80s, even though it's much more manageable now. But they're trying to take away some of the systemic or structural injustices that community faces as well.
Yeah. And a couple of points that you kind of touched on there, I think is really amazing is yeah, we've had very similar experiences in the coming out process, where like that was a primary concern with my parents as well. But another point that you kind of touched on was that like ability to have this disease that is supposedly, you know, the life-ending disease, right? But here we are living proof. I think I'm pretty healthy. I think you're pretty healthy.
Yeah.
We both take our medication, so you know, we're medication compliant.
And can you explain a little bit about what it means?
Yeah, so actually, this is a really cool thing. The CDC officially came forward because it refused to take a stance on this for a while. And now they have. So basically, when you take your medication, you have what's called your viral load. That suppresses the virus from reproducing in your body to a point to where it becomes basically undetectable in your blood. When they take your blood and they test it for the virus, they either can't detect it at all, or it kind of fluctuates between what the number is, but most people operate on the less than 20 per volume that they measure. So essentially that means you are at an undetectable status, which means you are untransmissible. So U equals U means untransmissible. You cannot actually give the disease. Before they used to believe that, you know, okay, if you like or you expose your blood to someone, even if you are undetectable, you could transmit it. After tons of studies that they've done and research behind it, they have been able to certifiably say, okay, if you are taking your medication, you're medication compliant, you're undetectable, you cannot transmit the disease to someone. So I could literally cut my hand and put it into a cup. Not that I would ever do this because that's wild, but and have someone drink it, and they wouldn't be able to pick it up for me. At least by the CDC standards, the way we understand the virus, that should not be a concern. Yeah, somebody who's medication compliant, not somebody that you should be afraid of or worried about. I'll never forget, I was out with some friends, and a friend of a friend took a sip of from a drink after me, and then I had to have a discussion with them to explain like why they shouldn't be afraid of getting HIV from me because they took a drink from my drink. And it's again, it's that education thing. I was willing to come to the table to meet that person and kind of quell their fear and bring that understanding. And that's kind of everything that we're doing tonight is really helping making sure that we're operating not just allies outside of the community, but allies within it. We are all allies to each other and advocating for each other. And that's actually one final point that I wanted to bring up. I host a charity walk. There's going to be some information that I'll be posting on my personal pages about it, but it is to benefit HIV treatment and testing in the local community here in Dayton. But if anybody is interested in participating in that in some way, you can do so virtually. It will be happening in October. I won't speak too much more about it there. I'll just leave it at that. But I would love any support from the community. Any kind of donations or time or just participation is all because it does go to advocate for HIV positive people in the local Dayton community here where I'm from. But that being said, we had a lot of really amazing people come and share their stories and experiences. I wish we had so much more time to share with everyone, but we have already taken so much of your time already. You know, it's so important that everyone is willing to kind of sit down and watch this and enjoy hearing everyone's stories with us. We'll go ahead and invite Julie and UA back on.
Hey!
Hey, Julie.
Oh, wait, I'm hearing an echo. Oops. Oh, I'm still here. Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
You guys hopefully hear soon. This was so amazing. I just want to say, like, I have personally learned so much, and I love just hearing everyone's story. It was like so, you know, like I feel like this was so amazing. Oh, here we go. Echo again.
Uh-oh.
Oops.
Echo.
It's just such an important point. I need to reiterate it again that this was so amazing. That's the echo. But no, thank you so much for leading this. And thank you to all the speakers that came out tonight. You all like were again just like the right mix of, you know, entertaining but also insightful, educational. Like we all walked away learning so much and really, you know, supporting each other in this community.
I gotta say, I've been part of a few Pride talks in the last week, and this was the most informative. This I learned. I was like, what's something new I'm gonna learn in this one in the next hour? I have an ongoing list of all the new information I learned, and I think it's just so enlightening to hear this talk about identity, because I guess like for me, Amy talking about the default being heterosexual, it's true. Like we all default to that, and we can't. There's a shift going right now, and I feel it, and I feel like this is no longer the default, and it's fascinating to see the shift, and I'm so excited for what's to come.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think that's all thanks to all of the diverse people that we were able to bring on. And again, I just want to thank everyone. I know Matt is as well appreciative of everyone. So thank you all so much for coming and sharing your experiences with us.
So, shall we wrap it up in true dateable fashion all together?
Let's do it.
We got to give it a stay dateable at the end, right?
Yeah.
Everyone at home, do this also in your homes. Yell
we
it from the
go.
rooftops.
3, 2, 1.
Stay
Stay dateable.
dateable. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Thank you, Ryan and Matt, for doing this entire talk. You guys need a spin-off show. That's what Julie was texting me about.
I was.
Well, it was really
Okay.
just letting people have this platform to talk. So giving all of us that platform as well. It's really important that, even though Dateable is kind of a heteronormatively based podcast, it is incredible that you're willing to allow us the stage as well to have our moment to talk about our experience as well. So it's really that kind of representation and visibility.
1000%.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for coming out and joining. And we'll keep this posted up for the next week or so, pinned to the top. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
okay.
Everybody.